What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here, bringing you another video. Today I'm bringing you a video on Power Rangers Hyperforce episode 17. Yep, we're 17 episodes in, and this episode was pretty good. It had some nice moments in it. It wasn't necessarily the most exciting episode, but it had some important moments, and we now have an idea as to where the Rangers will be going next episode, which is good because they've been staying in the Time Force era for, a couple episodes now. So it is nice to see that we have an idea where they're going next. We also got to learn about two other siblings that Vesper has, that are of her robot siblings that Firax or Dr. Ferric made, so that's important. And we finally got to have the Rangers meet Rancic, which is awesome. And we also learned that apparently there's some sort of past relationship that went on between Joe and Nadira. Yeah, pretty interesting, right? Other developments happen regarding relationships in this episode, which are pretty important, and we'll have to see how those play out in the future of the show. But overall, this episode was pretty good. So let's get started with the episode itself. It begins with us learning about the two other siblings that Spencer and Josh, the siblings that we did learn about the previous episode, have, which are Jocelyn and Rory. Jocelyn is a girl, and she's like the only other female besides Vesper in their family. And then there's Rory, who is this big and tall boy who's very tall. In fact, he's taller than Jack, but he's not as big as Jack. Let's just say that much. So that's interesting, of course. So what we do end up learning is that all the Rangers know about Rancic and know about his past crimes, and apparently he is working through a mutant rehabilitation program, and he's like the head of it. So that's very cool. And of course, it makes sense with his character. He really changed in the end. He still did his time, but he went about change, which is really important, and I appreciate that whole aspect. So the thing is that several times over, Vesper and the other Rangers try to reassure the android siblings that she has that Rancic has changed. I'm sure he's willing to talk, but they say, we've been suffering. He deserves to be punished for his actions. How could you not punish him? Joe even questions whether or not they witnessed the actions of Rancic, and the thing is that they basically say that they can't forget it. Like, it's engraved in their minds. That's how serious it was to them. So that's really important, of course. What we also end up having is that they believe no matter what that Rancic damaged him, and it's really important to understand all that. I'm trying to think what else happens. Vesper also brings up the idea that she wants to help, and she wants that if she's allowed to help, she needs her Hyperforce Rangers because she considers them family, and she's not going to forget them, and she cares about them a lot. Now all this happens. Eventually, what does end up happening is that the others all agree that they must do things at this moment, and they want Vesper because Vesper's one of them, even though she hasn't been with them in a long time. But the thing is that Vesper tries to be helpful, but Jocelyn gets angry, and she says, there's been 17 years where you and Dr. Ferric have abandoned us, and you come back in here and you expect us to just change everything we're doing. She gets really annoyed. She walks out. The others follow her. We do end up seeing some interesting things that happen here. What we end up seeing is that Eddie tries to connect with Vesper, and then they try to reassure Vesper's past family. Rory says that this is Vesper's last chance, and Spencer and Josh are there together while the others have already left. So then, following this, what does end up happening is that Joe tries to stop, I believe it was Jocelyn, and then what happens is that he's actually taken down. We do end up seeing that there is some fighting that occurs there, and Jocelyn still doesn't trust Vesper for abandoning them. So then Jocelyn goes out of the building. In the meantime, Eddie goes to check on Josh, because what does end up happening is that Spencer leaves Josh alone, and the thing is that Josh is not in good shape. In fact, he can't speak at the moment. So what they have to do is that Vesper uses her her health item or whatever, to fix, your healing charge to fix Josh because he can't speak and he's mechanical. He has the all the synthetic organs of a person, but he also has, machine-like parts as well. They're not very visible, but they're there. So it's kind of an interesting situation with him because, again, these are very, very specific types of androids that stand out from the rest. Of course, the other thing we do end up learning is that Rancic works in the City Hall area, and, he's the head of the rehabilitation center, so that's very important. What they do end up doing is fixing Josh, which leads to him being able to speak. We do also learn that Josh is apparently the same age as Vesper, but he never managed to grow in height. So he has the maturity of a 16-year-old, even though he actually acts more like a 6-year-old, and he looks like a 6-year-old. But he is just as smart, if not smarter, than Vesper is. So that's pretty important to understand. They do try to comfort him. Vesper tries to hug him. We do end up seeing that everyone knows where Rancic is because there are posters everywhere, so that's important. And Rancic will have some sort of protection. So he is not alone, although in this episode they say that, but then later on it's proved wrong because we never see much protection around him. In fact, they end up being the protection for him. So that's the part that's kind of confusing to me, because if you're going to say one thing and then do another, just choose one and end it there. It seems kind of strange to me. So all this does end up happening. Following this, Vesper said that she'll treat Josh like an adult. What is going to happen is that Vesper is going to talk to Josh about being friendly to Rancic before he goes away. He goes about attacking him. She decides to make him an honorary ranger, and they go on a field trip. So that all happens. Following this, what does end up occurring is that Joe explains that he can't go with them because apparently, we end up learning privately, Nadira and Joe were planned to be married, and the thing is that, as we know, he went off on his mission, and since then he never came back to officially get married to Nadira, meaning that we don't know what the current status is, and we still don't know what the current status is with their relationship, but they were going to be married, which is really interesting and definitely a different concept. So that does end up happening. What we do end up seeing is that, what do you call it? I'm trying to think what's next. They then end up leaving. The Rangers end up heading towards where, what do you call it? Joe heads off to go speak to Nadira. The other Rangers go to find Rancic in City Hall. They end up using some hover cars or something like that to head over to him. They go to City Hall. They actually meet the police chief that was above Jack when he was working on the police force before he joined the Rangers. And the thing is that the police chief basically tells him to clean out his office so that a new recruit could be brought in. So he's going to do that at the end of the day, and Chloe's going to help him later on. Following this, the Rangers are then informed that apparently Rancic is not there. He is actually at an animal shelter helping out animals, trying to do something nice with them, and also giving mutants a chance to interact with them and do nice things. So all this is happening. It's a nice situation. I'm glad to see all that happening. We do end up seeing that, what do you call it? When the Rangers do end up arriving at the City Humane Society, there are mutants there. Rancic is unloading the truck. We do see that Josh is holding onto Vesper's hand, and Josh ends up digging his hand into Vesper out of rage because he ends up seeing Rancic. He is so enraged. It's insane. And following this, what does end up happening is that Vesper tries to comfort him. Eddie does too by bringing out Burrito. Now, you may think to yourself, who's Burrito? Well, they decided to rename Yappy to Burrito, although I actually think they call him Rito the Burrito, which is cool. I like that. It's a nice name. So that's all nice, and he tries to comfort Josh. Josh does managed to calm down a little bit, though following this, Marv tries to block his view of Rancic because he knows he's just going to get more and more angry, and so, Marv basically becomes his friend without meaning to. My friend, I mean his unfortunate friend, because really, you don't want to be around Josh right now. So that does end up happening. In the meantime, Jack goes over to speak to Rancic. So yeah, first interaction with Rancic. I am very happy that this episode they decided to not make Zach the actor that's going to play Rancic. I was very happy to see that they ended up making Malika do it. Obviously, it would have been better than anything if we got Vernon Wells, the actual actor that played Rancic. But I'm not going to complain about Malika as much because she does a decent job. I mean, she definitely does not do the best portrayal of Rancic ever. But, I prefer it over Zach any day, no offense. Not that Zach is not good. It's just that if you know Zach from Hyperforce, he's very serious in a lot of the roles he plays. And, to me, I'm not really a fan of that. I want someone who could be a little bit more light and less serious. Even the more serious characters have their lighter side. He's just straight up serious in all of his roles. And, he's ruined some of the roles that would have been great to see had they been done differently. With other people doing them. No offense to him. Believe me, he works hard and I appreciate everything that he does. But to me, in his past roles that he's done through the show, I have hated them both. Like, I really, really, really do not like his roles. I thought that his Doggy Kruger was okay, because, Doggy is supposed to be serious, but he has some light side to him. At the same time, his Santa, awful. Hated how serious it was. Now, again, that's just a tangent. That's my opinion. And, of course, if you think that he did a great Santa and a great Doggy Kruger, that's awesome. His seriousness, I appreciate that for Doggy. For Santa, not so much. But let's keep going on. That's just a side note tangent that I wanted to just address because I'm sure some of you might be wondering what my thoughts are on that. And I just wanted to say that right up front. So what we do end up seeing from here is that, Jack informs Rancic about what's going on regarding these androids coming that are upset because of the past experiences regarding Dr. Ferrix, and he's upset because of the mention of Dr. Ferrix. So Rancic regrets everything that he had to do, and he explains the situation that apparently when he destroyed the lab, which he definitely did do, what did end up happening is that Frax was born from it, and the thing was that these androids actually ended up making made Dr. Ferrix into Frax. So that's important. So then following this, what we do end up seeing is that Rancic explains that he actually had this moment where Frax was a betrayer of him, and he actually, in the end, sacrificed himself to save Rancic, which is really important. And if he makes them aware of this, it would be really important as well. Although they don't do that. Several times over when things are brought up, they're later forgotten, even though in reality it would have been better if they actually were brought up in some way. Even just to show a sense of sympathy and understanding of, he may have screwed up, but there's forgiveness. And the thing is that even in the end, they really don't forgive. Like, neither side forgives or really shows respect for each other. They just kind of part ways, which is, that's okay, but it would have been better if there was some sort of interaction because we'll get into it, but it seemed kind of off. Anyway, following this, what does end up happening is that Rancic asks where the robots are. Some of them are nearby, obviously, because Josh is there. We do end up having this moment where Marv ends up bringing, Josh away to another location. Following this, we do end up seeing that Joe looks for Nadira. He ends up going to her old home, which there's like a video message that informs him that they are at the animal shelter helping out animals and all that. So he ends up meeting up the Rangers there. He actually specifically meets up with Eddie, and they have to go and look for Nadira, which they do find her. She's playing with some pets, which makes sense based off of what her character is and what she's known for being more cutesy at times, but deadly as well, though in this, they don't really show her more deadly side because, at this point, she's much more friendly. This isn't her earlier period of time where she was evil. None of them are evil here when it comes to Rancic and Nadira. They're not evil anymore, so they're not attacking or being catty. They're just being who they are. So what we do end up seeing is that from here, what do you call it? I'm just trying to double check what's going on here. They do end up having to, he ends up going to find Nadira. They don't manage to interact at first. Eventually, Marv ends up distracting the kid and has to bring him over to some snakes. So that is interesting. We do also learn that apparently Josh informed his siblings, because they're connected, that where he is, so that they know where Rancic is. So they know exactly where to go to find Rancic. There's no issues there. When they left, because of Josh going with them, they know where they have to go to have to go to find Rancic. So following this, what does end up happening is that Eddie Chloe informs the others about what's going on. Marv is distracted by having to focus on Josh. Following this, things continue, gets more serious. Chloe wants to put Josh in a cage because he's just so enraged and crazy and causing so much trouble. Then what does end up happening is that he tries to bring Josh over to talk to Rancic. Immediately, Josh gets angry, tries to attack him. Things are not going very well. Shortly after this, we end up seeing that the other androids arrive on the scene, and things get interesting from here. Several fights occur. At first, we end up seeing that Jocelyn is captured in a cryogenic chamber by Jack using his Time Force badge to capture her there. We do end up seeing that Vesper connects with Jocelyn at one point prior to this, so that's something, and that means like connecting via like a cord or some sort of wire or something. And following this, well, it's not like a cord, but it's sort of like they somehow connect through their necks or something. It's weird. I don't really remember the whole situation, but they do something like that. Later on, the Rangers continue to fight. Rancic gets really hurt, and eventually Jack ends up protecting him and trying to bring him to another location. There's also other fights that occur. Eventually, Spencer tries to attack Rancic. We do also have fights that occur with the other ones as well, where Jocelyn attacks, and what else is there? There's Jocelyn. Rory does as well, but in several cases, the different Rangers do end up restraining these characters. We do end up having it where Vesper shows the memories that she had to help Josh out of his current situation, because he has these flamed moments in his mind of his past and all of the terrible things he lived through. And eventually, because of everything that she informs him of and her ranger buddy, Wrench, she manages to actually convince him to turn to the side of good. It's not a simple thing, but in the end, Josh understands, and he ends up linking his mind to Spencer after he is taken down. So Spencer's being worked on. At that point, the ones that are left that are not captured or anything is Rory. And Rory does end up attacking Rancic, or at least he tries to, but eventually we end up having it where Joe and Marv try to hold him down. Following this, eventually Vesper does connect with Rory, and it's an interesting way, because what actually happens is that Vesper kisses Rory to connect, which is an interesting thing. So, she shares her emotions and memories, and they make up and reflect, and eventually the Ranger Buddy Wrench is, again, a useful tool that's used to fix things again. So following this, what does end up happening is that Rory is turned to the side of good. Jack has also, made Rancic retreat at this point. So that is all happening. There's several different small conversations that are occurring. Eventually, Josh and Spencer relieve themselves of their current situation, and then following this, they end up trying to release Jocelyn. And initially, she tries to attack Rancic, but eventually, what does end up happening is that the others restrain her and link minds with her to make Jocelyn understand that Rancic is good and we are not who we were anymore, and we will be good now. So all this does end up happening, and I'm glad that it does. In the end, they end up leaving. They say that Vesper is very lucky to be in her current situation. We do end up seeing, prior to this, after the interaction between Vesper and Rory, that Vesper tries to talk to Eddie, basically saying that I think now, after being my family and everything that we've been going through, this basically shows that I can't right now be in a real relationship, but I think we still can be Ranger buddies. So that does happen. Vesper does give Eddie a kiss on the cheek, and actually, I'm not sure if it's, I think it's the kiss on the lips, and following this, they basically separate and are upset. But they know in their hearts that, they're still friends. They're just not going to be in the same sense of relationship. I mean, they weren't like officially a thing, but, having that sort of situation where you're kind of pending on being and not being, now knowing that it's just not, it's good in the sense that there's more of a feeling of freedom. Although, of course, in the end, we kind of obviously hope that they do get back together. It's just what will lead to that, we'll have to wait and see. So from here, what does end up happening is that the Rangers, after saying their goodbyes to Rancic and Nadira, and also saying their goodbyes to the androids, they do discuss that they're going to go back to the Time Force base and talk to the people there to see what their next mission should be. In the meantime, we do end up finding out that yes, they have to go back to help out as well with Jack's office, cleaning it out. So Jack and Chloe go do that. In the meantime, Joe ends up speaking to Nadira to try to, say he's sorry for what he did and everything. And following this, what does end up happening is that he ends up cleaning out his office. We do end up meeting several of Jack's former old pals from his work, and there's lots of different interactions. We do end up seeing a picture, which, we only hear about it. We actually don't actually physically see it, of Jack and Marv being buddies back when Marv had joined and was close to when he initially was taken out of Time Force. So that is important. Following this, eventually we do end up hearing from the chief that was above Jack that there's this janitor who has been shouting all sorts of things about the Alliance and about their plans. Several of these things we already know. One thing we definitely do not know is that they're forming an armada now. That's very important. And this janitor's name is Stephen Lang. So at this point, what does end up happening is that the Rangers that are there, which are Jack and Chloe, go to investigate what they can learn from Stephen Lang. And Stephen Lang informs them that the Alliance is now going to the year 2014 to recruit an armada, which means that they're recruiting alien ships and other things of that sort, which is fitting because of that season being Power Rangers Super Mega Force. So that is important to note. Now, I'm very curious to see as to whether or not we're going to get a guest star next episode. I would kind of like that, just because we haven't had one for, I think, at least 5 or 6 episodes now. So it would be nice to see someone appear from Super Mega Force. Maybe it would be Gia, since she actually was going to originally play Vesper. Gia, she is actually the actress that played her was Ciara Hana, and that would be kind of fitting, but we'll have to wait and see what they choose. They could get any of them, because most of them live in America. You know, there isn't that issue with some seasons where like they don't live around here. A lot of them do, and a lot of them do conventions. Some not as much so, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get one of them, but we'll have to wait and see what does end up happening. So following this, you know, Stephen Lang is a really psychotic character, and eventually Vesper ends up slapping him across the face to snap him out of being his crazy self. He doesn't get snapped out, but he, you know, he calms down a little bit. So following this, the episode basically ends. Again, things were pretty good. There was no fireside chat this episode, which could have been good because there was a lot of really important things that happened, and I would have liked to have learned some of the things that I wasn't immediately aware of. And just in general, it's always nice to see the fireside chats, and it would be cool to see which actors would have done it. But they had something else going on that prevented it this time. So what I will say is that I like this episode. It would have been good to see some resolve happen between Rancic and the androids. It would have been nice, maybe even if they actually had the situation where maybe Rancic would have, you know, told them the story that that he told Jack about how Frax tried to save his life by sacrificing himself, and that would have been nice. Or at least showing something to, you know, have a payoff here. I mean, you have all this bent up rage, and you never have a moment where they could just say sorry to each other and, you know, apologize. Seems kind of odd to me. I'm not going to make a big deal over it, but it is something to note. They do also this episode also had a lot of mic issues, so I'm sure those of you that watch this episode, whether it be on YouTube or if you just watch it again in general, will hear those mic issues that constantly happen. They're not the biggest deal, but they do happen, and this episode definitely was one that had a lot of issues with mics. The last time there were a lot of issues was episode 12. I remember that very well because it was like really, really annoying. But this one definitely was bad as far as miking. Now, does that mean that the episode was bad? No. The episode was not a bad episode. I just think that that would have been one thing that they could have fixed, but I think that that has more to do with the actors themselves that are portraying these characters, moving the mics and hitting them often enough. So, you know, it creates problems. So keep that in mind. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe. I love to know your guys' opinions. What do you guys think of this episode? Do you think that Stephen Lang will be featured in later episodes, or do you think that this is a one-time thing where he was there just to inform the Rangers of the Armada and that they're going to the year 2014 next? Guess we'll have to find out. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Samurai 71, and goodbye, guys.